Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Daily Villa podcast as part of the Global Sports Podcast Network. My name's Craig and I'm delighted to be joined by our very own Nyla and as well as Joe from our friends at the GSPN Daily Palace. We're here to look ahead of the upcoming game, Aston Villa versus Crystal Palace at Villa Park. How are you doing today, Nyla?
Yeah, I'm doing well, thanks. It's actually my first crossover episode, believe it or not. I don't usually record on these days, but yeah, happy to be here and excited to get into the episode.
These ones are always fun until they go absolutely wrong. So, and speaking of wrong, we did lose to Palace in the Cup. So how are you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing well. I'm actually based up in Manchester, where it's been snowing quite hard outside my window. So I've enjoyed the switch to a proper winter. Like many a South American superstar before, it won't settle in Manchester, but I'm enjoying it while it lasts.
I see Nyla shaking her head at the thought of the snow, and I'm with you, Nyla. Can't stand it. So.
It's one of those days where it's just like, I really should not have switched from a field position to a goalkeeper because you don't run. So any cold weather, like training, matches, anything, it's not ideal.
You're just frozen to that goalpost. Right?
Absolutely.
I'm with you. So, guys, we're coming out of an international break. Obviously, Palace now have some internationals as well as Villa. And finally, I hear you cry that the international break is over. But the good news is it's non-stop domestic football now from all the way until March. So, Joe, as your team isn't currently in Europe, do you get annoyed by these international clubs, international breaks, as much as us big clubs, Villa?
No, it's a blessed relief from watching Crystal Palace every week. To be fair, the international break at the moment has each one's been a delight. I do miss Jean-Philippe Mateta, who continues to be snubbed by Didier Deschamps, despite his impressive 3 league goals this season and his obvious potential to be the Giroud to Mbappe's Mbappe. But no, I mean, I think it's obviously football being played for a purpose, and no, the Nations League doesn't quite count as a purpose for me. And mainly watching European football, it's not particularly exciting. I do miss the routine of the Saturday football and all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, I think Palace can use all the breaks available to them. So the international break's not so upsetting, and the prospect of playing solid domestic football until March is actually quite alarming.
And to be fair, for Villa as well, Nyla, the international break couldn't come at a better time, really, with how we've been doing. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted, actually. I felt like, this is a great opportunity for, us to reset, use this break, and then just headlines and headlines of people dropping out of teams or being sent back and injuries. So, yeah, I don't really know. But other than that, I don't hate international breaks. I don't love them. I think it's a good opportunity to see players that might not otherwise play together in a situation where maybe you're in camp for a couple days and then you're going to competition. But other than that, it disrupts the flow of the league, doesn't it?
It really does. But thankfully, Saturday at 3 p.m, all the attention will be back at Villa Park, as Villa will be looking to put their season back on track after a recent dip of form, or should we say an avalanche of form. We play Crystal Palace, who, despite good results with beating Spurs and knocking us out the Carabao, yes, that one still stings a bit, have had a bit of a disappointing season. So, Joe, how are you feeling about the season so far?
As you allude to there, it's a real shame because it was picking up prior to Palace's last game before the international break, which was that defeat at home to Fulham. Before then, back-to-back wins against Villa and Spurs, and a good performance in a 2-2 draw away at Wolves. You felt like a corner was being turned. But I think in terms of the atmosphere in the stands around the club, that was all completely destroyed, really, by the by the loss to Fulham, which is unfortunate because that loss is probably justified really by the injuries. Palace had very few, a great number of first team players not available for that game, and a great number of the most important first team players. I think we'll come on to that more later, but it still, despite that, because of everything that had come before it, it really sacked the energy out, and it just got to the point where it's like, when are things going to turn for the club? Because until then, they'd kind of been quite patient. I would say Palace had quite a disrupted summer. Few key players left. A lot of players have really long summers with their national teams, and you could see that while the results were bad, the performances weren't objectively awful, and there was no one clear thing that they absolutely needed to fix. So there was quite a lot of patience, just thinking this is going to click into place again, and they'll be able to pick up, if not quite where they left off after a great end to the previous season. They'll be able to pick up again and be competitive and fine. And it's just not happening at the moment. And it's been quite a painful watch. So I'm not even, my secret is, I gave to Craig earlier, I'm not even a Crystal Palace fan. So I keep questioning why. It's like I've signed up with three members of a family to video call them 3 times a week about the progress on like their dog getting sicker and sicker. And it's been quite painful.
Group
it's been
therapy.
Painful sometimes. Yeah. I like to think that I'm the level head, but actually I'm not. I'm feeling the sadness as well.
I think, as Nyla said, therapy would only just cost more. That's the only difference it would be, right? So Nyla, speaking of therapy, Villa unsuccessful in the last 5 games. You have to go way back to October 22nd in our Champions League to get our last victory. So how are you feeling going into this Palace game?
I'm feeling hopeful, actually, and I think that's only because I came across an article by The Athletic essentially saying that Emery's just been working overtime, doubling the workload, analysis, all of that stuff. So I'm really hoping that he can find a way to bring out the most of the players we have available for this match. But other than that, I hope we don't do that again. That wasn't fun.
No. We were saying recently, Joe, that the Villa podcast has been very easy to do as of late because we've just been on one major high running, and then all of a sudden it hit us like a brick wall. And we now had to start covering bad performances, losses. I don't think I signed up for this, but
I read that same article actually that Nyla's talk about as really upset. The idea that a man who works 12, 13-hour days anyway is working harder to prepare the team for this game is quite alarming from a Palace point of view.
Sounds great to us. Well, I mentioned earlier that the international break just has me concerned with the injuries. And with us looking at both teams, neither are short of the casualties for this weekend. I see Palace are without Kamada, who's suspended, Walton, who's out till early December. Emery is also out till December. They've got Nikita, Lemar, Franca, who won't be available to December or January. Are you concerned with that growing list, Joe?
Yeah. The good news, Palace, is it hasn't got worse over the international break. Basically, the players who were injured before have had some time to recuperate, and I think the players who went off and played international football seem to have come back in one piece. Again, it's possible some of those players might be back a bit earlier than expected. Oliver Glasner's quite coy, but I wouldn't expect to see much change to the injury list for this Villa game. The problem is, as much as the number of injuries is large, it's the concentration of them, that they're all in largely either to central midfielders or to the best creative players in the team. So at the last game against Fulham, thanks to suspension to Will Hughes as well, Palace had to play with Gahey and young Justin Devaney on his Premier League debut in centre mid, and that was a key factor in them just getting kind of dominated and overrun, really, if you ask me. The good news for Palace is that Will Hughes is back from his suspension, and I think the key bit of injury news or fitness news for Palace will be about whether Czech Decore is ready to start. He did come off the bench a couple of times before the international break. You never really know how fit he is, but he's almost, Palace play this kind of two-man midfield with Glasner, and he's almost the most suited player in the team to that, really. He's a really big, dominant, aggressive midfielder, great on the ball. If he's fit, Palace are a much different proposition to if he's not, and it'll be Will Hughes and either someone young or someone out of position, and Will Hughes will have to try and tactical foul his way to not being completely overrun in midfield, and that's led to him being suspended already, picking up 5 yellow cards in 9 games, whatever it was, when he's not even started everyone this season. So I think that'll be the key thing. But they've also, being without Eze and without Kamada, there's a bit of a lack of creativity in the side. But yeah, I think Glasner would be, well, like, the best thing for him to do is not try and rush them back, because if they try and get them ready before they are, as something Hodgson did wrong and was one of the final nails in his coffin last season by bringing Elise on when he wasn't ready in the derby with Brighton, getting him injured, missing another month. They've learned from that. Glasner's very calm, and I think they'll probably be thinking any points they can get out of Villa away are a bonus. So I think basically it's concerning, but the best thing to do is the concern is not for the next game. The concern is almost that they'll try and play them in the next game and rush them back and get them injured again. Whereas if they manage it sensibly, no more bad luck, fingers crossed, the squad should be back up to decent strength in a few weeks, and they might kind of get away with it. But it's just sort of one or two, one more kind of domino falling away from the whole squad being decimated, it feels like right now.
Wow. Well, the good news for you, Joe, is the fact that Villa are not without their fair share of injuries either. With Onanu's reported to be out through lack of fitness. Mattison's out. Ramsey's out for a few weeks. Cash is still out till late November, as is Barkley. And more worryingly, Torres is out. So, Nyla, how do you feel about this list, and what's the main worry for you?
Not great, to be honest. That is shocking. I think, and a common theme over the last couple episodes on Daily Villa has been the back line, and to have so many of our defenders not able to play or out for long periods of time, I think is disappointing and a bit scary. You want players to kind of build a momentum and to have chemistry with who they play with. And when you have people coming and going so often, I don't think you can really achieve that. I have no idea what Emery's going to do. What are your concerns with that?
Just like you, I'm concerned with it in general. I do think, though, and this is no offence to Palace by any stretch of the means, but because you guys are so short on
well, I heard the SH that I didn't think sure was coming out.
Yeah, so I think this is a good opportunity to try one of our youngsters. Nedeljkovic is the player that I would have gone with. I think if he can come in on the right back, and it looks like Konsa's going to be good because he's been removed from the doubt side of the injuries at the beginning of the week. He was a concern. So I think that could bring Konsa back into the middle, which our listeners will see that I've been a big advocate for that since day one. So even though this is a concern for us, the amount of injuries that are piling up, I think this could be a blessing in disguise, because if this gives Nedeljkovic a great opportunity to shine against a team like Palace, because he did a good job when he played against Arsenal, and then he wasn't seen again. It kind of felt like maybe he was caught cheating with Emery's wife or something, because he disappeared off the radar completely until he actually played against Palace in the Cup. So I think this is a great opportunity for him. The other doubts in my mind is what we're going to do with the right side of midfield. And it's not necessarily about injuries. It's about the fact that Diaby hasn't been doing too well. Philigine's pushing on the door in order to get an opportunity. But I'm also kind of thinking that because Palace play that like 3-4-2-1 formation, our defenders are going to have to tuck in tight to deal with those three. So we're not outnumbered with the three in attack against our two centre-backs. So I think if Nedeljkovic is picked, then I think we need a more, let's say, defensive quality on the right. So like a McGinn, who can shift from the left side of midfield to the right side of midfield to tuck in a bit tighter, giving Nedeljkovic a bit more freedom to get forward so he can cover on any transitional play. So those are my major concerns. And we've talked about it briefly about the starting lineups, but we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about who we think are going to start for both teams.
Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we've spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform, and let me tell you, Zencaster came out the clear winner. With 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs, it's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. If you're ready to tell your story, then check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencaster.
Welcome back, and we're here joined by the GSPN Daily Villa, Nyla, and GSPN Daily Palace, Joe, to talk about everything to do with this match on Saturday between Aston Villa and Crystal Palace. Starting with our visitors, Joe, how do you see Palace lining up this weekend? Granted that hopefully you still have 11 players that you can field.
So the constant debate at the moment has been, should Glasner switch the system? Will he change to a 4? Apparently it's been tried in training a few times. I don't think we'll see it here. I think they will stick to the 3-4-2-1 that you alluded to for a couple of reasons. One, it is Glasner's first choice, and prior to that Fulham game was starting to yield results in the season, including against Villa last time they played in the Cup. Two is that at the moment, Palace have an abundance of central defenders, a lack of centre mids. So switching to a formation that requires more midfielders and less defenders would be kind of insane at this point. I also don't think he'll take any major risks with the likes of Nketiah and Eze that we've spoken about. I think if they're 50-50, I think he'll just leave it. So what I'm expecting is Henderson in goal, Chalobah, Lacroix, Guéhi as the back three. The midfield 4, if you call it that, of Munoz, Hughes, Decore and Tyrick Mitchell. And then a kind of front 3 of Sarr, Mateta. And I think a lot of Palace fans would like to see someone from the youth academy given a go in the sort of left attacking midfield, left wing role, but it'll probably be Jeffrey Schlupp. That seems to have been the solution that Glasner's turned to in similar situations. The one of them I think is most sort of wobbly is Decore, because he just never really know how fit he is, and he didn't travel or feature for Mali, I think, in the international break, despite the fact that he's made a couple of appearances before that for Palace. So if he's not fit, I would think, given the sheer lack of other options, Guéhi will probably be pushed into midfield again, and someone like Chris Richards will come in at the back. But yeah, I think that's the most likely lineup as I see it.
When Palace have played against other teams that are, let's say, towards the top half of the table, like you've we'll still class Man United as one of those teams, for example. You've played against Liverpool, you've played against Man United, you've played against Spurs. Obviously, you got a really good victory against Spurs. When you play against those teams, do you often see that the back three becomes a back five? Do your outside mids pinch in a lot, or is it more trusted that the three defend and then look to counter?
It's to give the cliched answer, I'd say it's a bit of both.
Okay.
The first instinct of Glasner is definitely let the three defend. I think he's signed players who can cover a lot of space at the back because of that. Most notably, Maximus Leclerc, who's absolutely rapid. He has that kind of Kyle Walker-ish, leave him on the halfway line and trust him to mop stuff up. And he pushes Mitchell and Munoz really high, and I would expect to see that against Villa because without Eze in the team, they're often the main creative outlets, particularly Munoz. Mitchell is not really his natural skill set, but nevertheless, he does push him up high to stretch the play. And I think the plan A is always win the ball back quickly, stop them breaking, rather than having the players drop back. Of course, at times when Palace just can't get on the ball, it ends up being closer to a back five, just so they get pushed back and back and back. But I think it's very rarely the plan, even against the top teams. And certainly in the latter half of last season, when Palace were flying against United and teams like that, it was really, and Liverpool, both Munoz and Mitchell were pushing up really high, playing really aggressively, and just sort of trying to box them in for most of the game. There were times where I think a lot of Palace fans would like to see them pulled back a lot more because quite a few counter-attacking goals this year where you can see that Tyrone Mitchell has just got nothing in the tank and can't get back into position, and player cuts in from the right and pops it in. That was the case against both West Ham and Brentford, if I remember rightly. But I would say more often than not, very aggressive fullbacks, trust the back three to defend. Don't even leave a centre mid back sweeping, really. And I think that's one of Palace's. Sure, it's one of their attacking strengths, but it's one of their major defensive vulnerabilities. And so far this season, it's been more vulnerability than strength, probably.
Yeah, the reason I asked about that was because, and Nyla can allude to this as well, is the fact that last year when we were playing, say, in the Conference League, we really struggled, and it's been evident this season as well, we struggle with teams that sit in against us. It seems that we need that space in behind to get in behind them and disrupt their defence. So any team that sits in on us, we seem to lose a bit of ideas, a little bit of general ideas in breaking teams down. And with the likes of, say, Leon Bailey struggling with form at the moment, I feel like that could be an issue if you did drop into a five. But on the flip side of it as well, we played against Liverpool recently and we looked like children defending the counter-attack. So that also could literally destroy us if Palace are able to do that. Nyla, how do you think Unai's selection is going to be? I know early you were struggling a little with how we're going to pick with these injuries.
Yeah, well, thank you for the Liverpool reminder. I was just getting over that one. But I think for me, like I said, I'm always, I think, defensively thinking, defensive-minded. So, like, starting with the back line, of course, we'll have Martinez in goal. I was actually playing around with who or what the back line could look like. Will we see Mings make another appearance? But that was, dependent on what was happening with Konza. But I think the back line could be, I would expect it to be, considering Konza fit, like Konza, probably Diego Carlos, Luca Dean, and then who are you? Nedeljkovic, sorry, yep. And then
flip a coin for the right back position, couldn't you?
Yeah. And then of course we'll have, McGinn, hopefully Yuri Tielemans is all fit. I know that he didn't go out to play for Belgium in the break, so hopefully that's all sorted. Would expect obviously Morgan Rogers, Ollie Watkins, Leon Bailey, even though, like you said, he's struggling a bit with form. And then I would go with Jaden Philogene. That would be my 11. Who would you expect to field?
I think he's going to give Bailey another run out. So I do think Bailey will start over Philogene. And I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be disappointed if we got the Mings-Konza partnership back if Torres cannot start. If Torres starts for me, I think he's a bona fide starter. Right now, I don't think there's anything that should take him out of the team. But if he's doubtful and can't last the minutes, I think it might be time to see Mings back, and I'll be one happy camper to see that. I'm a big fan of Tyrone, and I can't wait to see him back full time with the Villa. And for him and Torres to be battling out for those positions, we've said all along we need that strength in depth at the Villa, and finally we've got it in most of our positions now. So that's really good stuff. So we're going to take a short break as we hear from our Global Sports Podcast Network partners, and we'll be back to talk more Villa and more Palace.
This podcast is part of the Global Sports Podcast Network, the only network bringing you exclusive daily news and views on your Premier League team, the Premier League, women's football and fantasy football. A unique listening experience that puts fans first, bringing you the very latest breaking news from your team. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and make us your first listen every day. Global Sports Podcast Network, every club, every day.
Welcome back. We've been talking about Villa's up-and-coming game with Crystal Palace, and now it's time to put your money where your mouth is and make those dreaded predictions. How do you think the game will play out, and how do you think the score will go? Let's start with Nyla.
I think it'll be an interesting game. I think it'll be a lively game. I think recently, just looking at, aside from Fulham, some of the Crystal Palace results, I would expect them, and, saying this with our Villa's inability to keep a clean sheet, I would expect them to maybe get one up on the board. But I'll go with a 2-1 win to Villa. But yeah, hopefully it'll be a good match, entertaining, but we'll get the 3 points.
What do you think, Joe?
I'd go one more and give it a 3-1 to Villa. I think they're really well set up to exploit Palace's greatest weaknesses, which if you can play, they kind of press almost a midfield four. They'll push up together. If you can play through them, you can run right at the heart of defence and cause problems. I think Morgan Rogers and Ollie Watkins are two of the best in the league in those kind of situations right now. So I think they're well set up to exploit Palace's vulnerabilities. I don't see Palace Leicester overly tweaking the style to account for that. So I think it'll be fairly comfortable Villa win.
I'm not going to break the mold with that one. I do think that Villa's going to win. I honestly think we've got a point to prove, and I think as Nyla alluded to earlier, with Unai taking this very to heart, the form that we've been in recently, and he does seem like a manager that will have many sleepless nights after losses. So to go this long without a win, I think there's going to be a point to be proven. So I am going for a victory for Villa, good 3 points at Villa Park, and I'm going to go with 2-0. So that's about it. That's all the time we have on the Daily Villa podcast. Thank you very much, Joe, for your time coming on the Villa podcast. Best of luck to Crystal Palace after this Saturday for the remainder of the season. Thank you, Nyla, for joining us as always. Be sure to get in touch across all our socials that you can find in our podcast description. This has been the Global Sports Podcast Network production. Thank you for listening, and Joe, up the Villa.
Up the Eagles.
Every club, every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.